Hi, it's CR Gaming here. Today we're going to talk about the DC-3. I'm going to show you everything you need to know to fly this plane. I am cold and dark. If you ever want to change to cold and dark, you just flip this little switch right here. And that turns everything off. So the first thing we're going to do is get some ground power on and turn on some batteries. I want to make sure these cowl flaps are open. Then we're going to go through up here. We want to make sure that our engines have the primers turned on. We need to turn our magnetos on, so we push this little pull off button to turn it on, and then we turn our magnetos here to the bolt position. Now if you were going through the full checklist, you'd check that each one runs properly, but we're just showing you how to get everything started. Next thing we want to do is make sure these booster pumps are on, and I'm going to turn on some cockpit lights even though I don't really need them. I'm going to turn on my GPSs at the moment so they have time to get their GPS fix. Next thing we need to do is get rid of this yoke so it's not in my way. And I'm going to turn the left engine to the left main fuel tank. Then over here, the right engine to the right main fuel tank. Then I'm going to put my mixing valves, these red ones, all the way forward. Throttles are going to be about 10%. And props are going to be all the way forward. That's these white ones. So we should be ready to start the engine at this point. I'm going to flip this to the left and turn on the starter. And we should be starting up now. There we go. So I'm going to flip this to right, turn the starter back on. And as you see, the left engine as it started, the primer went off. And there's the right engine. So let's turn off our ground power at this point. Now because I went cold and dark, my GPS did decide to get rid of my route. So I'm going to go direct to Newark. So that's KEWR, right? I'm actually in JFK right now, so that's just a short flight away. There we go. So now you see I got my pink line on my GPS. Now a couple things we got to do before takeoff. I'm going to hit Control 4. This is our gear lock. Now normally you would leave this latched, but I don't have a co-pilot to look down here while I'm trying to fly the plane, so I'm going to unlock it so it's ready to be pulled up ahead of time. We also have our parking brake down here. I'm going to turn that off. We also have our aileron and rudder trim down here. I'm going to leave those as they are, and I'm going to lock my tail wheel with that one. Okay, it looks like we're rolling because I didn't put my feet on the brakes here. Let me get the brakes turned on. We do have flaps here. If you did want to take off with flaps, you pull this yellow lever out. If you push it down, all the flaps go down. Push it up, the flaps go up. And middle is just neutral. I'm going to leave the flaps in the up position. You can see them go up and down over here. That's your indicator of where the flaps are. Unlike a normal plane, there's not just like a number 1, 2, 3, and 4 flap position or degrees like a Boeing. So it's a little bit more complex. I'm going to set my altitude to 4,000 feet because that's where we're going to cruise at today for this tiny little short flight. And we should be ready for takeoff. So at this point, I'm going to give full throttle. Now this is in the red zone on the gauges if you notice, but in real life they would take off at full throttle. There was a problem with DC-3s where if you went from a restricted takeoff to full throttle in emergency, it would sometimes crack the cylinder heads. So they then recommended just taking off in full throttle. So as you can see, the nose went down all on its own. I'm going to gently ease back on the stick now. And we're in the air. So I previously unlocked my gear so I could pull that handle up. We'll have to relock that later. And I'm going to turn my autopilot on for a slow climb. We're climbing a little bit too fast right now. So I'm going to click on autopilot. And it was at 1,000 feet per minute. I want that at about 700 so we don't stall out. So as you can see here, we're climbing a little less than that, almost 700, climbing all by itself. The wings are automatically leveled because we have the autopilot on. And I'm going to go down to underneath the console here and lock our landing gear in the up position. And if I had our flaps down, we would have to be doing that right now as well, but I don't have the flaps down. So, as you can see on our GPS, we are off course. Our course is to the left of us. The easiest way to get on course is using that nav button. But because we're not set to intercept it, the plane's not automatically turning to get on nav. Oh, actually it is. I guess I was just close enough. If it doesn't automatically intercept it, what you can do is you can actually use your yoke to turn the plane while it's on autopilot, and it will allow you to turn it, as long as you don't get too aggressive that you turn off the autopilot. But the nav button is now going to be following this pink magenta line. We also do have a heading hold here. The problem with the heading hold is it's set to due north, and no switch or knob on this plane will turn that. If you do have a Bravo or another type of controller that you can move the heading bug, you can actually use that heading hold as well. But unfortunately, it does not work unless you can manipulate it outside the airplane because there's no switch here to do it. That's definitely a bug on the airplane. One other bug is these aux fuel tanks will not work. As soon as you try and switch to the aux fuel tank, I have my fuel pressure gauge right here. If you look closely, it's going to drop as soon as I switched it. It goes right back up as soon as I go back to the main. I've tried switching with the boosters on, boosters off. There's no way to switch it that'll work. So that's a little bug right now. The workaround is hitting Control E, because then it will pull from all your fuel tanks, but that kind of takes away from the realism of the plane. So I don't generally do that. But that is an option for you. As you can see, the plane's automatically turning right to stay on course. Heading to Newark here. Now, as we climb, we should be throttling back. We were actually supposed to throttle back as soon as we passed 110 knots. But because I'm a single pilot without a co-pilot, I'm talking to you guys, I kind of forgot. So what we want to do is move the throttles back until we have 36 on our manifold pressure. That's this gauge right here. So you see that's about 36. Now there are two needles on all these gauges, as you can see, for the two different engines. I generally keep them together though. On our RPM, we want to throttle that back as well. Whoops, I guess move these. RPM, we want to move them back to 2350 for climbing. That's a little bit too far. Somewhere around there is pretty good. And as you can see, we're out of the red zone on these two gauges. Now, if we move over here, we do see that we're over on temp on a... Let me just double check that our left engine is running here. Why is our left engine not running? Okay. Check our prompts. Why is... As you can see, our left engine is dying here. I'm not quite sure why. I'm going to try and run the starter one more time. Probably because I pulled the fuel back on it to show you the aux tanks weren't working. There we go. Okay. So to restart the engines midair like I just did, what you'll need to do is reduce the throttle to 10%. So I reduced just the left engine to 10%, and I just accidentally clicked this here. So let me move this over. Okay, that's fine still. So you want to reduce the throttle to 10%, and then flip on that starter. If it wasn't starting, would have used the primers again, but I figured it was going to not have a problem here. So we got that engine started. As you can see, we're following on course. And we're climbing to about 4,000 feet. As you can see, we're still climbing with the autopilot on. Now, if we were doing a flight over 10,000 feet, we would turn on these superchargers. Those will help the engine performance, but we don't really need to worry about that today. And we're on a really short flight, so we're not even going to get to the point where we're cruising. But if we did get to cruise, we would want to reduce our throttles to 30 on the manifold pressure here. And we'd want to reduce the RPM to 2,050 here. So that would help us maintain a good cruise fuel performance. You know, that's basically giving us the best performance we can without sacrificing, too much fuel. So just to show you a little bit around the rest of the airplane here. Over here we got all of our gauges. Obviously we got our airspeed indicator, altimeter. This compass can be adjusted with this knob right here. Our altimeter can be adjusted with this knob right here. And our barometric pressure settings right there. This is our ADI, similar to what you'd see on a normal plane, just a lot older. Climb indicator, turn indicator. And then over here we have a couple compasses. Got the radial altimeter here. And this is going to be our ILS. Now, obviously, I don't have the correct frequency tuned in right now. That's why it's just showing way off to the right. It's grabbing something else. Down here, we have all of the engine performance gauges. So these are what we're using to make sure we're at the right performance levels. Over here, we have all the temperature gauges. As you can see, now that I've reduced our throttle, our oil temp and our cylinder temp are within normal ranges. The carb temp is not. I'm not sure why the carb temp is always hot on this plane. I think it might be a bug on the plane. But just, you don't want that much higher than it is right now. Down here, we got our fuel gauges. There's nothing in my left aux. You can rotate this to show you the different tanks, how much fuel you have. Then over here, we can open our doors. Normally, you wouldn't do this in flight, but just to show you, that is our main passenger door. And this is our cargo door. And you are supposed to flip this up when you're on the ground and starting the engines. This last switch here. Now, as we climb, we were supposed to set these to the trail position. That's what we'd use in flight, not the open position. Then over here, we got our windshield wipers if you need those. All of your old school navigation stuff is up here. All the GPS navigation is right here. And if you are using the gyro pilot on the other plane instead of the GPS, you can click this and move that position to forward. You're supposed to use that for when you're using a gyro pilot. We have the GPS, so I don't think this makes any difference at all. But that pretty much is the entire plane. When you do come in for a landing, you're going to want to land on the front two wheels. If you land on the back, all three at the same time, what's going to happen is this tail is going to be blocked by the fuselage. And when that happens, you really don't have enough rudder control. So you do want to land on your mains, then drop the back down. Now do remember that we had our tail wheel locked. You can decide if you want to lock it or not, but that's going to be this lever right here, is to lock the tail wheel or not. If you have your rudder and your tiller one of the same, you might want to lock that tail wheel, just because if you use too much rudder for a crosswind landing, you might end up spinning out as soon as you land. So that's not a good idea. Make sure your parking brake is indeed off before you land. And as you land, you want to make sure the tail gets down before you start applying brake. Otherwise, you're going to go right over the nose. But that's pretty much everything you need to know about this plane. I didn't go into mixing too much, so let me go into that real quick. On the mixers, there's a couple of notches. One is right here, as you can see on the right mixer, how it goes to the right there. That is the auto rich setting. That's what you're going to use for climbing. Once you get to cruise, you're going to go to the auto lean setting, which is right over here. You see how it drops in over here. That's going to save you a lot of fuel while you're cruising and make sure the engines perform at their best. So for now, I'm going to leave it in the auto rich setting as we climb. If you do want to open the windows, you click right there and you can open the windows and hear the engines a little better. The front one's open as well. And just as you climb, make sure you keep an eye on your airspeed. You don't want to go too slow and have the plane stall out. So right now, I had it set to climb to 4,000. It now says Alt instead of VS because we've arrived at 4,000, and we are good to go. So that's pretty much all you need to learn about the DC-3. If you do have any questions, feel free to ask me. And thanks a lot for watching. Please like and subscribe.